What if I told you that the absolute worst weather conditions are actually your golden ticket to the biggest catch of your life? Imagine standing on the bank, the wind is howling, whitecaps are tearing up the water, and every other fisherman is running for their trucks. Most people look at that chaos and think the fishing is done for the day, but that is the biggest lie you have ever been told. Today we are talking about fishing in those brutal, chaotic, heavy winds, right before a massive spring storm hits. I am going to show you a completely unexpected truth that will change how you look at bad weather forever. I am going to reveal exactly why the guys who stay home on the couch are the ones complaining that the fish just are not biting. Are you brave enough to fish in the eye of the storm? Drop a comment right now and tell me, do you pack up when the wind gets scary, or do you stay and fight? Let us find out who the real anglers are. For generations, we have been handed down the same old fishing advice. Grandpa always said that when the wind kicks up and a storm is brewing, the fish get spooked, drop down to the bottom, and completely shut off. Because of this belief, 99% of fishermen pack up their gear and head home the second they see dark clouds forming. It makes sense on paper, right? It is uncomfortable, it is hard to cast, and nobody likes getting splashed by freezing spring water. We naturally assume that if we are miserable above the water, the fish must be miserable below it. But here is the reality check. People have been doing the exact same thing for years, missing out on the most explosive bites of the season, all because they are afraid of a little wind. This topic is crucial because understanding what actually happens underwater during a pre-storm front is the difference between going home empty-handed and holding up an absolute monster for the camera. It is time to forget the old myths and look at the brutal truth. Let us picture the scene so you know exactly what we are dealing with. You are standing on the edge of the lake early in the morning. At first, it is dead quiet. Then, the wind starts to pick up out of nowhere. The sky shifts from a bright blue to a nasty, bruising purple and grey. The trees are whipping around, and the water turns from glass into a chaotic mess of waves. This is the moment most guys fold. They look at the whitecaps, they feel the chill hit their face, and they decide it is time to go grab a hot coffee. But you are different. You stay. You grip your rod tight because you know something they do not. The myth tells you to leave, but the science of the water is begging you to stay. That falling barometric pressure is literally pushing down on the lake. It is ringing a dinner bell that every big predator can feel in their swim bladder. They do not care that it is windy up top. They care that the pressure is dropping, and they need to gorge themselves before the actual rain starts falling. You are standing in the middle of a ticking time bomb of a feeding frenzy. Think about how baitfish react when the wind turns the lake into a washing machine. In calm, clear water, baitfish are comfortable. They are spread out, swimming around freely, and they are very hard for predators to ambush. But when those massive spring winds start howling at 30 or 40 miles per hour, everything changes. The wind creates strong currents that push the microscopic food, the plankton, toward one side of the lake. The baitfish have no choice but to follow their food. They get swept up in the current and blown right up against the windy shoreline. They get disoriented, they are tumbling in the waves, completely out of control. Now imagine you are a big, hungry bass. Are you going to sit out in the middle of the lake doing nothing? No way. You are going to sit right against that windy bank, wait for the confused baitfish to get pushed right into your mouth, and you are going to eat until you are full. The wind is doing all the hard work for the predators. It is setting up an all-you-can-eat buffet. One of the oldest rules in the book is that you need to find calm water to catch fish. Guys will spend an hour driving their boats around the lake just to find a quiet, protected cove where the water is flat. Let me tell you right now, that is a massive mistake. When you hide from the wind, you are hiding from the active fish. Calm water during a pre-storm front is dead water. The predators have left the quiet coves because the food has left the quiet coves. You have to be brave enough to turn your boat around or walk your boots right over to the nastiest, windiest point on the lake. You want the wind blowing straight into your face. Yes, it makes casting an absolute nightmare. Yes, you will probably get a bird nest in your reel if you are not careful, but you have to cast directly into the teeth of the storm. Because when you drag your lure back with the waves, imitating a dying, helpless baitfish getting pushed by the current, it triggers a strike so aggressive it will nearly rip the rod out of your hands. Let us talk about visibility and the magic of the mudline. When heavy winds smash into a dirt or clay bank for a few hours, the waves churn up the bottom. This creates a distinct line in the water where the muddy, dirty water meets the relatively clearer water further out. This is called a mudline, and it is the ultimate ambush point. When the sun is out and the water is clear, big fish are easily spooked. They can see your boat, they can see your shadow, and they can clearly see that your lure is a piece of plastic. But when the wind chops up the surface and creates that muddy water, you essentially turn the lights off on the fish. Their vision is restricted. They can only see a few inches in front of them. This makes them rely heavily on their lateral lines to feel vibrations. They sit right on the edge of that mudline, waiting for a vibration to come close. When they feel it, they do not have time to inspect it with their eyes. They just react and bite out of pure instinct. The wind gives you the ultimate cover to fool the smartest fish in the lake. Choosing the right lure in these chaotic conditions is where a lot of guys mess up. This is not the time for finesse fishing. Put away your tiny, weightless worms. Put away your delicate little drop-shot rigs. When the wind is howling and the water is crashing against the rocks, a fish is never going to find a silent, slow-moving bait. You need to make noise, and you need to make a lot of it. You want lures that create massive vibration and flash in the water. I am talking about big, heavy spinnerbaits with large willow blades that thump hard. I am talking about loud, rattling crankbaits that dig into the bottom and bounce off the rocks. I am talking about vibrating jigs that shake the entire water column. You have to cast these heavy baits into the wind because they have the weight to punch through the gusts. More importantly, they put out a signal that a predator can track down even in zero visibility. You want them to feel your bait coming before they ever see it. You are trying to trigger an aggressive reaction, not a gentle feeding tap. You also need to drastically change the speed of your retrieve. When the water is flat and the sun is high, you have to reel slowly and tease the fish into biting. But right before a massive spring storm, the energy in the water is absolutely electric. The fish are fired up. Their metabolism is spiking because of the pressure drop. If you reel too slowly, they might just watch your bait pass by. You need to speed it up. Burn that spinnerbait just under the surface of the choppy waves. Crank that plug back to the bank as fast as you can. You want to make the lure look like a panicked baitfish fleeing for its life in the middle of a chaotic storm. When a big predator sees something moving fast and erratically through the rough water, their predatory instinct takes completely over. They do not think, they just attack. I've had days where my arms were burning from reeling so fast, but that was the only way to get a strike. Do not give them a single second to analyze what they are looking at. Now, let us get real about boat control in these conditions, because it can be downright terrifying. If you are fishing from a boat, heavy winds will test every ounce of your skill. Your trolling motor is going to be working overtime, draining your batteries fast. The waves are going to be slapping against the hull, throwing you off balance. It is exhausting. The biggest mistake boaters make is letting the wind push them too fast down the bank. You end up blowing right past the strike zone before your lure even gets to the right depth. You have to learn how to lock down. If you have spot lock on your trolling motor, use it. If you do not, you need to use the wind to slowly drift, keeping the nose of the boat pointed into the waves to slow you down. It is a constant battle between keeping your balance, maintaining your position, and making accurate casts. It requires focus and physical endurance. This is exactly why so many people quit and go home. But mastering boat control in the wind is the secret to staying on top of the feeding frenzy. Because boat control is so difficult, sometimes the absolute best strategy in a pre-storm gale is to fish from the bank. I know guys who own expensive boats, but will intentionally leave them on the trailer when a massive storm is rolling in. Bank fishing in these conditions gives you a massive advantage in stability. You are standing on solid ground, leaning your body weight into the wind. You do not have to worry about the boat drifting or the trolling motor dying. You can carefully pick apart a wind-blown rocky point, step by step. You can make parallel casts right along the muddy shoreline where the fish are stacking up. I remember a day last spring. The wind was blowing 30 miles per hour straight into this rocky bank. The guys in boats were struggling to hold their position and eventually gave up. I walked down to the shore in my boots, stood right in the mud, and cast a red crankbait parallel to the bank. I pulled out 5 massive fish in 1 hour. Being on foot in a storm often gives you the upper hand if you know where to stand. There is a very serious psychological factor at play when you are fishing in heavy, chaotic winds. It is a mental game as much as a physical one. Mother Nature is screaming at you to seek shelter. The cold rain starts spitting, hitting your face like tiny needles. Your fingers are numb, and every cast feels like a chore. You look out across the lake and realize you are the only human being left out there. It is a very lonely and intense feeling. You start questioning your own sanity. You ask yourself why you are suffering through this when you could be warm inside. But then, you feel that distinct, heavy thump on the end of your line. You set the hook, and the rod bends double. A massive fish breaks the surface of the choppy water, shaking its head in the grey light. In that exact fraction of a second, all the cold, all the wind, and all the misery completely vanishes. The adrenaline spikes through your veins. That moment of chaos and triumph is a drug, and it is the reason we braved the storm in the first place. Let us bust another huge myth right now. People think that because the surface of the water is rough and wavy, the fish will naturally seek refuge in the deep, calm water at the bottom of the lake. This sounds completely logical to a human being, but fish do not think like humans. Fish are driven by the food chain. As I mentioned earlier, the wind pushes the bait fish shallow. The wind churns up the bottom and releases insects and crawfish from the mud. All the food is concentrated in the shallowest, roughest water on the lake. Therefore, the biggest, meanest fish are also going to be in the shallowest, roughest water. I have caught huge bass sitting in less than 2 feet of water, while 2-foot waves were crashing over their heads. They do not care about the waves. They care that dinner is being served right in front of them. If you back off and fish deep during a pre-storm wind event, you are fishing completely under the active fish. You have to get up shallow and get dirty. You also need to pay very close attention to the wind direction and how long it has been blowing. A quick gust of wind that lasts 10 minutes is not going to change the lake, but a heavy, sustained wind that blows consistently from one direction for several hours will completely alter the ecosystem of that lake. If the wind has been blowing hard out of the south all morning, the entire northern shoreline of the lake is going to be packed with active fish. That is where the warm surface water is being pushed. That is where the plankton is piling up. That is where the mudline is forming. You can eliminate 80% of the lake simply by looking at the weather app on your phone and finding the banks that are taking the direct hit from the wind. Do not waste your time fishing the calm, protected southern banks in this scenario. Focus all your energy on the chaotic, wind-blown northern banks. It is a simple pattern, but the guys who follow it are the ones catching the giants. We need to talk about your gear, because fishing in a storm is no place for cheap or faulty equipment. When the wind is pulling your line tight and a big fish smashes your lure going the opposite direction, the impact is brutal. There is no stretch, no forgiveness. If your knots are tied poorly, they will snap instantly. If your line is old and frayed from rubbing on rocks, it will break. If the drag on your reel is sticky, you are going to lose the fish of a lifetime. Before you step out into a pre-storm frenzy, you need to check everything. Retie all your knots with fresh line. Use heavier fluorocarbon or braided line than you normally would, because the water is muddy and the fish cannot see it anyway. Make sure your hooks are razor sharp, because you need to penetrate the mouth of an angry fish while fighting against the wind pulling your rod. When the chaos hits, you will not have time to fix broken gear. You have to be locked, loaded, and completely confident in your tackle. Safety is something we cannot ignore when discussing this tactic. Being brave is one thing, but being stupid is another. You have to know the difference between a pre-storm feeding frenzy and a life-threatening situation. When you are out there in the heavy wind, you must keep one eye on the horizon at all times. The wind is great, the dark clouds are great, but the absolute second you see a flash of lightning or hear a rumble of thunder, you are done. Graphite fishing rods are literally giant lightning rods pointing up at the sky. Holding one during a thunderstorm is a deadly mistake. The golden window we are talking about happens before the storm actually arrives. It is that dark, windy, high-pressure drop phase. Once the lightning starts, or the torrential, freezing downpour begins, the magic window closes. The fish usually hunker down once the severe weather sits right on top of them. You catch your fish, you pack up quickly, and you get off the water before the danger hits. Let us talk about the subtle visual cues you need to look for when the water is choppy. When it is calm, it is easy to see a fish jump or a baitfish flick on the surface. But in a gale, the waves hide a lot of the activity. You have to train your eyes to look for different clues. Look for seagulls or herons hovering near a windy point. They know exactly where the baitfish are being pushed. If you see birds diving into the rough water, you better cast your lure right into that exact spot immediately. Look for lines of floating debris, like leaves, foam, or small sticks. The wind creates underwater currents that trap this debris in long lines across the surface. These debris lines act like a roof for the fish. They sit right under the foam, waiting in ambush. In the middle of all the chaos, these tiny visual hints will guide you to the exact spot where the fish are stacked up like cordwood. Another massive advantage of fishing the heavy winds is that it completely resets the fishing pressure on a public lake. We all know how tough it is to catch fish on a Saturday morning when there are 50 other boats running around, revving their engines and throwing lures at every single rock. The fish get smart and they lock their jaws. But when a massive spring storm rolls in and the wind hits 40 miles per hour, every single one of those boats goes home. The lake suddenly becomes yours alone. The noise of the outboard motors stops. The constant splash of hundreds of lures stops. The fish realize the humans are gone. Combine that lack of pressure with the natural feeding instinct triggered by the dropping barometer, and you have a recipe for success. I love pulling up to a crowded boat ramp, watching everyone struggle to put their boats on the trailer to escape the wind, while I'm just getting ready to launch. You are trading comfort for exclusivity. There is a specific technique for casting into heavy wind that you must master if you want to be successful. If you just rear back and throw your lure high into the air like you normally do, the wind will catch your line like a parachute. Your lure will blow 30 yards off target, and you will have a massive bow in your line that prevents you from feeling a bite. You have to learn how to cast low and hard. You want to keep your lure no more than 2 feet above the water during the entire cast. This is called a roll cast, or a sidearm pitch. You whip the rod tip low, driving the heavy lure straight through the wind to your target. As soon as the lure hits the water, you immediately close the bail or engage the reel and bury your rod tip down close to the surface. By keeping the rod tip down, you keep your fishing line out of the wind. This maintains tension, allowing you to feel exactly what your lure is doing in the rough water. Do not underestimate the power of the wind creating current on a lake. A lot of anglers think currents only exist in rivers or creeks, but sustained heavy winds will literally push the top layer of water across a lake, creating a strong undertow that pulls water back in the opposite direction underneath. You are essentially fishing a temporary river system. Fish instinctively know how to position themselves in a current. They point their noses directly into the flow, waiting for food to wash down to them. When you are casting, you need to bring your lure in the same direction the water is flowing. If you cast against the current and drag your lure up behind the fish, it looks unnatural and they will ignore it. You want to cast upwind or up current and bring your bait naturally past the ambush points. Understanding how to read this temporary wind current is what separates the guys who catch 1 lucky fish from the guys who catch 20 in an afternoon. Let us talk about the specific transition zones that the wind creates. A shoreline is never just one straight, boring line. There are points that stick out and pockets that cut inward. When the wind blows hard down a bank, the water hits those points with maximum force, creating a massive disturbance. But right behind that point, in the little pocket, the water creates an eddy. It swirls around and is slightly calmer. This transition zone, where the chaotic water meets the slightly calmer swirling water, is the absolute holy grail of pre-storm fishing. Baitfish will get trapped in that swirling eddy, exhausted from fighting the waves. The big predators will sit right on the seam, positioned in the calmer water, but watching the chaotic water. You cast your lure into the rough stuff and pull it right across that seam into the calm pocket. Bam! That is exactly where the strike happens 9 times out of 10. Finding these micro-transition zones is the key. You have to mentally prepare yourself for the fact that you are going to lose some lures. and you are going to get frustrated. Fishing in a chaotic storm is not smooth or easy. You will cast into a tree branch that is whipping around in the wind. You will get your crankbait wedged into rocks because the waves push your boat out of position. Your hands will get numb, making it hard to tie a new knot. You are going to cuss at the wind, but this is part of the process. You cannot let the frustration break your focus. The guys who succeed in these conditions are the ones who can tie a knot with freezing fingers, bite off the tag end, and immediately get back to casting without losing their temper. You have to embrace the suck. You have to tell yourself that the miserable conditions are exactly why the giant fish are eating. Every time the wind tries to push you off your spot, remind yourself that there is a 10-pound monster sitting right there, waiting for your bait. Finally, let us talk about the exact moment the magic window closes. You have been fighting the wind for 2 hours. You have caught some incredible fish. The sky is now pitch black, and the temperature drops 10 degrees in 5 minutes. Then, the first massive, heavy raindrops start falling. The wind might even suddenly stop, creating an eerie silence just before the deluge. This is the transition from the pre-storm frenzy to the actual storm lockdown. Once that heavy, cold rain hits the surface of the lake, the barometric pressure usually bottoms out and begins to rise again. The water temperature drops quickly. The feeding switch that was flipped on 2 hours ago suddenly flips off. The fish drop down deep and lock their jaws. The bite dies almost instantly. But that is okay. You have already experienced the best fishing of the month. You are packing up your gear, soaking wet, exhausted, but you have a huge smile on your face because you conquered the chaos while everyone else was hiding at home. So, let us wrap this up. We have completely shattered the old-school myth that bad weather means bad fishing. The most unexpected twist in all of this is that the very conditions that make us as humans miserable, the howling wind, the dark skies, the crashing waves, are the exact conditions that make big fish feel safe and aggressively hungry. Mother Nature uses the wind to set the dinner table, trapping baitfish and giving predators the ultimate muddy ambush cover. By understanding the barometric drop and using the chaos to your advantage, you can catch the biggest fish of your life while the fair weather anglers are sitting at home watching TV. It completely changes how you look at the weather forecast. I want to thank you for sticking with me through the storm today. If this video changed your perspective on fishing in the wind, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a like on the video. Now, I want to hear from you down in the comments. What is the biggest fish you have ever caught right before a massive storm hit? Let us debate it down below, and I will see you out on the water.